Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Info Tap. I'm glad you made it. Hey, are you getting more tricks than treats from the VA? Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. Since it's Halloween, I kind of thought, I might as well talk about that because I think that oftentimes we end up throwing it against the wall and seeing what sticks, and that is definitely not the way that you want to deal with the VA. What happens is that inevitably you're going to end up getting the result that you're not looking for. When it comes to VA claims, there's two things that I want to talk about fairly quickly here. And for those of you that have watched for a while, you get it. You've heard me say it before. You've probably seen other people talk about it. But I just think it's really important to continue to share kind of the methodology behind it. So with that, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. I appreciate it. If you're not a member, consider joining. It does help out the channel a lot, and it helps me to find you guys in the comments. All right, so jumping into it. First, I'm going to start off with when you file a claim with the VA and they deny you, that is not a good thing, right? You're filing a claim because you believe that you meet the qualifications for a service connection. So what I want to talk about first is what it takes to have basically the main components of a successful claim. And for those of you that have watched, you already have heard this. It's three things in my mind, right? And there's obviously more, there's more nuance to it, but it really boils down to three things. You have to have your time in service. You have to have a diagnosed condition. You diagnosing yourself doesn't mean anything. You actually have to go to a doctor and have them diagnose you with X. Now, here's a little caveat to that one. Not only does it have to be a diagnosis of something, it has to be something that is chronic in nature or has some sort of residual effects. Okay, so now you have that diagnosis in place. The third thing, and this is where a lot of people, I think, get wrapped up, is we need what's called a nexus, a link between your condition and your time in service. Now, here's the thing. The VA is not saying that the only way to do that is to prove that the military caused the condition. That's not what they're looking for. We, for whatever reason, as a veteran community, seem to think, until you don't anymore, obviously there's people that don't, but at the very beginning, right, when you first start thinking about filing a VA claim, we often think, well, I have to somehow prove to the VA that my condition is because of my military service and to somehow prove that the military caused it. And that seems like a really high bar. And many of us give up with just the thought of, I don't even know how I can prove it, so forget it. So then what happens is a couple different things from that. One, it gives you the wrong lens to be looking through, and then there's some judgment potentially that as you see other veterans that have claims and they're successful with their service connections, and maybe they have high ratings, 70, 80, 90, 100%. And you're thinking, how in the world do you have that? So then it creates this kind of weird, bad taste in your mouth, which isn't good either, right? Because we're working with half a deck, right? We don't have all the information that we need to actually form real, concrete opinions on anything, right? We're just kind of half guesses through it. So what the VA is really looking for is not so much prove to me that the military caused it, of course, unless the military did cause it, right? So, but that's not the only way. That's one piece of the 8 pieces of pie. What the VA is really looking for and saying is, prove to me that your condition started during your time in service. Show me that it manifested. Show me that it is as a result of, right? So there's many different ways you can frame it, and it's all different pieces of the pie. So presumptive conditions, for example, with the VA, and there's a whole list of them for different situations, right? You got the stuff through the PACT Act, you got the Agent Orange stuff, you got Camp Lejeune stuff, you have the first year after you get out of service, you have some that trickle on beyond that for several years, you have ALS, which is forever. Those presumptive conditions, erase the need for a nexus. Simply serving in the military and having a diagnosis for a presumptive condition, as long as you served in and where they specify for those specific presumptive conditions, then you get it, service connected. So barring the presumptive conditions, what we're looking at is really show me that your condition manifested during your time in service. Okay. And again, you can do or is a result of your time in service. So maybe you were on, let's say that you're not, I'll give two examples. So one example will be, it started during my time in service, and the other is this showed up 30 years later from my time in service. Not presumptive. Okay, so these are, you have to prove the nexus. So I'll give you two examples. One example is I started getting migraines while I was in service. I never went and got diagnosed because I knew that it was migraines. I went to my corpsman or my medic and I got handsfuls of Motrin and I took those. And when I was home, I would just go to the grocery store and I'd buy Motrin when I was buying my milk, right? And that's how I just treated it and pushed through, and that's how I did it. And then it wasn't until 10 years later or whatever that I ended up getting a diagnosis for migraines, but I've had them ever since I was in. It's why go to the doctor if I know what it is and I'm treating it with over-the-counter medication, right? So that is the conversation of having it during your time in service. Maybe you didn't document anything when you were in. Now with your diagnosis 10 years later, you would also want your doctor to write a nexus letter explaining it. You'd want to get buddy statements, that type of stuff, all pointing back to your time in service. The buddy statements are basically people that know you or knew you then that could attest to knowing that you had migraines, right? So that's the one that would be in service, and you're showing that it manifested during your time in service somehow, some way. The next would be the out of service, showed up 30 years later. Well, let's say that you were in the Navy in the 70s, and you were never qualified for Agent Orange because you were never, you weren't within the 12 miles since they added that in, thank goodness, the Blue Water Navy stuff. But you were on ships that were just riddled with asbestos. And or you worked on a shipyard where you were working on ships that were riddled with asbestos. And sure enough, you come down with lung cancer, and the whole rest of your life you were just doing, desk jobs. You never had anything that would put you at any sort of high risk for that. Now, remember that the VA's threshold for approving or denying comes down to 50-50. If your evidence is in equipoise, meaning that it's equal on both sides, for and against you being service connected, the VA is supposed to rule in your favor. So, it's at least likely as not that your lung cancer is a result of your time in service sniffing asbestos, right? Licking the walls, whatever it was. So the VA should rule in your favor. You just need to prove, right, that you were in this environment. It would be helpful to get just a doctor's letter from your doctor that's treating your lung cancer that your lung cancer is, more than likely, ideally, but at least likely is not as a result of your time in service in the nexus letter. So that's two kind of versions of nexuses to get a successful claim. So the number one thing is making sure that your claim is successful when it comes to filing it. Get the service connection. That's the number one thing. But most people stop there and they just, actually, a lot of people don't even think about how to structure it. They just throw it against the wall. Maybe they're missing the nexus. They might even be missing a diagnosis. I have this because I think I do, and I should be service connected for it. Here, VA, make it happen. And the VA goes, you have no proof. It's not service connected. Thank you. Have a great day. Then the next stage is, okay, you throw everything together and your fingers are crossed that it happens. Now, when it comes to getting that service connected, that's great. And like I said, or I started to say anyway, most people just stop there, right? They think they got it done. They're going to get service connected, and now it's pins and needles. The waiting time is horrific. You're sitting there on your hands, waiting, checking. When is it going to come through? Am I going to get granted? First of all, are they going to give me the service connection? And what's my rating going to be? I have no clue. Well, in my opinion, you should have a clue, because if it shows up anything less than what you think it's supposed to be based on actual documentation, then you know you need to fight for a change, right? So if you don't know what you should be rated, you don't know if you're going to be rated the appropriate thing. So what I'm trying to say here is that in the schedule of ratings for the VA, it spells out exactly what you will be rated for any given signs and symptoms and duration of things, whatever your situation is, it spells it out. If you have X, Y, and Z from your condition, you get a 10%. If you have X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3, then you get 30%. If you have all of those plus 2 more, then you get a 50%, right? So that's how it works. And basically, if you read through the schedule of ratings for each one of your conditions, read through it, some of them are pretty easy for you to understand. If there's words that we don't get because it's medical jargon, Google search translate it to a real word, right? So, for example, difficulty swallowing is not written down as difficulty swallowing. It is just, it's some, I don't even remember what it is now. It's a fancy medical word. So interchange it and see, and then go, yes, I have that, or no, I don't, right? And then you'll know what rating you should have. Now, here's the key. Before you file your, now I hope people hung on. Before you file your claim, you need to make sure that you are getting that exact verbiage, those signs, symptoms, and durations put into your medical file. So that way, when you submit that as evidence, it's in there. Then double down when you go to your C&P exam. When you're at your C&P exam, you need to make sure that you have that same conversation with the C&P examiner expressing that you have those exact signs, symptoms, durations, whatever it is, right? You need to spell it out exactly what the VA is calling for. Sometimes we get so sidetracked and we hear so many different things that we're sitting there trying to just, rattle on and on about how it affects my life and I can't do things and my quality of life is horrible and I this and I that, when it's 7 words over here in the rating schedule that the VA is looking for that will drive you to the rating that you should be. So do your research and make sure that you are expressing the exact items that the VA is looking for the rating that you qualify for. Based on, look, you're the patient. You get it. You know where you're at. You know if you have X or not. Right? So make sure that you are sharing that information. With that, we'll let it go there. Thanks so much. I hope everyone has a great day. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.